No Labels. That's the name of a rising political movement that's planning to shake up the 2024 election. The group's objective is to move both parties away from extremist agendas and back towards the center.
There's even talk of creating a third-party unity ticket if the choice comes to a showdown between Biden and Trump. Chief political analyst David Brody has the story.
Headlines are touting the potential impact of No Labels as it lays the groundwork of a possible unity ticket in 2024. Civil rights leader Dr. Benjamin Chavis, an ordained minister and former CEO of the NAACP, is navigating political waters to support the centrist effort.
The reason why I'm moving to the center with No Labels is because I want to see further change. I want to see our nation do better. I want to see our nation open up more opportunities for all of God's people.
No Labels has been a Capitol Hill presence for years, supporting the House Problem Solvers Caucus. It's helped lead to bipartisan achievements like the recent infrastructure bill. As 2024 approaches, members believe Americans want a moderate, common-sense alternative and point to polling that shows nearly 60% of citizens would support a centrist presidential candidate. Critics push back on those numbers.
I know 538, which is a political organization, some others have said, now the middle's actually not that big.
The good news is the middle is growing. The middle is expanding, and it's intergenerational. Millennials, Generation Z, but also elders, middle-aged people.
No matter how big or small, No Labels believes these voters really don't want to see another Trump-Biden rematch.
What is it about that rematch that has No Labels concern exactly?
I would like to see President Biden move more to the center, not to the left. And I would even like to see former President Trump move more to the center, away from the extreme. So let's see what will happen. What I predict is we're going to stir a national discussion about these issues.
And they've got tens of millions of dollars to do just that. Right now, the priority is getting on the ballot in all 50 states. They're on a handful so far, about 5, with more to come. Next spring, they will announce final plans at their convention in Dallas.
We're going to discern whether or not a unity ticket, that is a Republican and a Democrat or a Democrat and a Republican, if that ticket has a pathway to win the majority of the Electoral College votes.
While they won't name names on that ticket, Monday in New Hampshire, centrist Democrat Joe Manchin headlines a kickoff event announcing their new common sense policy book for America. With former Maryland Republican Governor Larry Hogan also a No Labels guy, the group is triggering both political parties.
You're getting fire from all sides, but
we're getting fire from both sides of the aisle.
Right.
Right now, probably more fire from the Democrats.
Right.
Because they are nervous that somehow we would tip the balance
over to Trump
in favor of former President Trump.
Dr. Chavis's resume dates back to the 1960s as part of Dr. Martin Luther King's civil rights movement.
When he made his I Have a Dream speech, it was undergirded by his faith in Jesus Christ as coming to heal, restore, and resurrect humanity from self-destruction. And I think that we need that today more than ever before.
Do you think he would be a No Labels guy today?
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. Chavis also is convinced that in today's political atmosphere, we need to hate less and love more.
We may disagree on some political, but you're not my enemy because we disagree on something political.
Benjamin Chavis told me he's leaning heavily on his faith as No Labels looks for guidance and support in its 2024 mission. Gordon?
Well, let's talk about No Labels. They're holding its kickoff event today, releasing more details on the agenda. Give us the specifics.
Well, there's so much to go through. It's 72 pages. I mean, let's start with immigration. They want a border wall, but they also want surveillance as well, more agents on the border. So that'll please Republicans and conservatives. They also want dreamers to have a pathway to citizenship. So that kind of gives you an example of how they're trying to split the difference. The Second Amendment is a good example. They believe, obviously, in a constitutional right to have guns in this country. breathe, but they also think there should be universal background checks. And so you go down the list, they want a balanced budget amendment, all of that. And so school choice is something they want, but they also want to make sure that every child doesn't go to bed, obviously, needy and wanting to have, making sure that they're not hungry when they go to bed, excuse me. So you put it all together, and there's, if you cherry pick it, there's some stuff in there for progressives, there's stuff in there for conservatives. The real question is there really an appetite for the center? And that really is the tough portion here, Gordon, because ultimately, look, we're in a polarized environment here, and we are on the extremes in both parties and both ideologies.
Well, I've got an appetite for the center. I think that's where you govern from. But is there a candidate associated with this, or is it just ideology?
Well, they are very tight-lipped on who the candidate might be. Having said that, there are some high-profile candidates associated with the movement right now. As a matter of fact, in New Hampshire on Monday, Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat, will be there. And then you've got Larry Hogan, the former former governor of Maryland, as well. John Huntsman has also been associated with the No Labels movement. So you've got a whole bunch of different politicians, but no one's really committing at this point. And No Labels isn't committing to anything at this point until their convention in March or April, as we heard, of next year. Then they'll decide. If it's Trump versus Biden, they will field a unity ticket. The question is who exactly. They're not going to say right now.
All right, well, if it is Trump versus Biden, and everything seems to be shaping up, it will be Trump versus Biden. If the election were today, it would be. So who would that candidate favor? I'm old enough to remember Ross Perot, and his candidacy absolutely favored Bill Clinton. He took away independent voters from Bush. Who do you think will benefit if there is a third-party candidate?
The conventional wisdom, roughly, overall, is that it will favor Donald Trump. That in essence, the No Labels is getting a lot of heat from progressive groups, not just on Capitol Hill, but all across the country. There are going to be groups starting to form against No Label because they don't want to see Donald Trump win the presidency again. I think it's an unanswered question as to whether or not it'll favor Trump. It could also favor Biden. Remember, think about Joe Manchin. I mean, if Joe Manchin, for some reason, is the candidate, he's kind of the one that's being talked about the most. I mean, he's going to pull from Biden. He's going to pull from Trump. And Ross Perot, you mentioned that, he hurt Clinton, but of course there's views and there's some analytical data out there that Bush got hurt as well. And so, it depends how you spin the numbers. Ross Perot got 19% of the vote. It's the most a third-party candidate ever got in the history of United States politics. So it remains to be seen how that's going to shape up.
No, I firmly believe he hurt Bush. He didn't take from the Democrat base. He took from the Republican base.
That's right.
So anyway, I'm not trying to take anybody's vote away by saying if the election is today. We're not going to know who the major party candidates will be for some time. I think as long as Biden is in the race, he's going to win the Democrat, but we'll see on the Republican side. And speaking of which, Donald Trump skipped a major event for evangelical voters in Iowa. Why did he do that?
Well, he says it was a scheduling conflict, but I mean, I can read a calendar relatively well. This was an event on a Friday. His event that he said it was a scheduling conflict was on a Saturday. So Friday and Saturday don't fall on the same day. I'm not that stupid. So look, what was it exactly? Well, look, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, I think a lot of things are personal with Donald Trump. This was Bob Vander Plaats and the family leader. Bob Vander Plaats has not been a big fan of Donald Trump, so that might have been part of it. Look, he went to Ralph Reed's event, the Faith and Freedom Coalition, in front of a couple thousand evangelicals. Well, Ralph Reed and Donald Trump have a good relationship, so I think that was a part of it. But I think there was a mistake for Donald Trump not to go. I mean, it's interesting because Donald Trump has always appealed to people and connected with people because he's railed against the elites in this country. But if he's going to start to now, in essence, start to become one of them by saying, hey, I don't need to go to that event. And that was a big event. I mean, Tucker Carlson was there. All of the candidates were there. And it was Iowa in front of 2,000 evangelicals. It was a big event. If he's not going to go to that event, and he's thinking about skipping the first debate as well, I mean, that's the last thing he needs to do. Remember, like I said, he railed against the elites, and the last thing he wants to do is become an elite himself by saying, I don't need to do that. I think it's a danger zone for him and unwise. Having said that, the caveat is, will it really matter? I mean, he's so far ahead of every other candidate, and I think right now the pulse and the movement of the party is no doubt with Donald Trump. So it may not matter in the end.
Well, I'm with you on that one. I don't think it's going to matter at all. Let's talk about DeSantis. He certainly has had a lot of cash burn over the initial start of this campaign. And it looks like he's running out of cash because he fired about a dozen people on his campaign staff. So why is he struggling to raise money?
Well, I think it has to do with a couple things. One, expectations. I mean, I thought there was a sense in the donor class that he was going to come out of the gate and boom, he was going to take off in the polls, and that didn't happen. But I think the problem, the underlying problem here for DeSantis is that you've got to connect with voters. Donald Trump is a billionaire who speaks like a cab driver that can connect to the blue-collar worker out there, and he has a connection. I mean, Bill Clinton, remember back in the 90s, I feel your pain, right? He was able to connect. Barack Obama connected with Hope and Change. George W. Bush connected. I can go down the list. Ronald Reagan, of course, connected with voters. Ron DeSantis is yet to make that connection, that visceral connection, emotional connection with voters. It's early. We'll see if he can do it. But he's a policy wonk guy. He's wonkish. I mean, that's what he is. I mean, that's not his bread and butter. He's not a guy that's going to do that. So I think that's been part of the problem here.
All right. Well, David, thanks for the insights. It looks like we're going to have a very active presidential campaign.